Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'll take off my disguise. My name is Inga Cotton. I'm the founder and executive director of San Antonio Charter Moms. And these are Charter Moms Chats. And we've been going live to talk to parents in our community about things that they can do to keep your kids learning during the pandemic, to do distance learning or getting your kids back on campus safely. And we've had a whole bunch of at-home learning activities. Over the summer, we called them Charter a Summer of Learning, and we had an activity from the Briscoe Western Art Museum that Ryan Badger developed for us. That was right around in early July, I think. So Ryan is a repeat guest. He has a new set of activities to commemorate Native American Heritage Month, which happens every year in November. So Ryan, thank you for coming back. And I'm going to embarrass you a little bit by introducing you. So Ryan is the Curator of Collections at the Briscoe Western Art Museum. And pop up that name. And so that's a downtown institution. It's on the Riverwalk. And so Ryan gets to do things like play with antique spurs and Alamo artifacts and things like that. But he grew up in the mountain Northwest, but he has worked at places like the Alamo. He's worked for the National Park Service. Let's see, the Smithsonian. So he brings just a wealth of knowledge, and it's always a treat for me to open up a post that he's written, because it just has this love of learning, but also this playfulness and this curiosity and love of the outdoors. So, and Ryan's a dad, so he's got two kids that he's been pandemic parenting as well. So this comes from not only his experience at the Briscoe, but also his lived experience as a dad. And we all want to keep our kids not bored, out of trouble, keep them happy and learning and doing fun stuff together. So today we get to talk about these activities for Native American Heritage Month. So Ryan, welcome. Thanks for joining us on Charter Moms Chats.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. It's wonderful. I don't know. I love getting calls from you because I know it's all right, time to flex my programming muscle, and then it's a great opportunity for me, especially like you said, with my two kids. Just to delve into playing around with some programming and using them as my little guinea pigs. Because right now we're all in that same boat. How do we keep them engaged and interested in learning about the world around them when their world has shrunk so much?
Yeah, for real. Yeah. I want to explain for anyone who's watching or anyone who's listening on the podcast, Ryan is actually in the car. He said he was doing some recon at another museum in Texas, but he's on his way back to San Antonio. And I mentioned how I thought this was very appropriate for the theme of the West, because there are so many such vast spaces and everyone's always on the move. So you can see out through the windows the changing scenery.
So, yeah, we're driving along. Yeah. I'm not driving, so yeah.
Right. No, this is
just a passenger right now.
Exactly, right. So this is the Cannonball Run edition of Charter Moms Chats.
Absolutely.
Okay, so so the reason why we wanted to bring the Briscoe back with content for Charter of Voyage of Learning for Native American Heritage Month is that Native American heritage is such an important part of telling the story of the West. And so I was wondering if you could elaborate on that and talk about what the Briscoe's mission is and why you guys have so many events and exhibits. Native American Heritage Month and Native American Heritage Day.
Yes, definitely. So the Briscoe Western Art Museum is dedicated to capturing the art and culture and traditions of the West. And so, from my personal perspective, when I started learning about the West, a big part of it, of course, was the cowboys and the mountain men and everything like that. But then also, I knew a big part of my learning had to come from learning about the Native people that call the West their home, the original inhabitants of the landscape. And so I wanted to make sure that it was highlighted, especially as we get to November, Native American Heritage Month. We really wanted to make sure that we were creating and providing some activities and putting some activities out there that would allow parents to be able to look at kind of a very small section, a small panoramic of Native American activities or Native American themed activities that they could use as fun ways to connect with their kids from all ages, ways to teach them about the heritage of the entire country, its origins, and bring a little bit of fun and some interesting new ways about thinking of Native American heritage. just, I mean, because November, people tend to gravitate towards headbands, headdresses, things like that. And honestly, those sorts of things, they just are really, in very many ways, not appropriate. These feathers are essentially medals of honor for these people. So, like, as myself and my colleagues were talking, like, we've got to find a way to be able to broaden out that perspective of Native American heritage, what they have brought to our culture even today, and how can we use that in ways to engage children.
Right, right. Yeah, that it's important to, like, tell the stories with sensitivity, right? And not just,
Absolutely.
not just, keep telling the stories the way they've been told before, right? And really stop and examine, right? And listen to, how Native Americans tell their stories, right? And not just what the, white culture is saying about it. Yeah. I think that, the activities you put together are all, they go a lot deeper than just like the Thanksgiving story or just putting on a headdress. There's just so much more to it. So so let me ask you about the activity for preschoolers, but it's really like you include a historical photo of adults playing it. So it's ageless and timeless. But it's simple enough that young kids can do it.
Absolutely. And I was thinking about this, and this was kind of a tricky one. This is one that I thought through for a while. Excuse me. And I actually had learned at one point. So prior to coming to Texas, background, I worked over at the Museum of the American Indian over in Washington, D.C. for the Smithsonian. And part of our training was to learn some of these games and cultural traditions. And this game that we played is called the hand game. And as you say, in this activity, we have an image of adults playing it. And so this is something that is played by all ages, but it was one of those things that was designed originally to be able to teach coordination, to teach observation, and then to have some fun doing it. And I just remember with my kids when they were young in preschool age, hand-eye coordination was such a part of their learning. It was so essential. And I remember playing guessing games with my kids. And every time I'd take a quarter and I'd put my hands behind my back and say, all right, pick which hand it's in, right? And they loved it. And it taught them to be a little bit more, I mean, they were guessing more than anything else. But the hand game teaches you to be observant. And you can do this just as with a one-on-one activity with yourself and your child, keeping your hands in front of you. You keep your hands moving up and down and up and down. And you change which hand you have. And in the case of the hand game is a Comanche game, this particular rendition, the instructions that we have, but it's used by many different nations, different variations of it. And they would use a bone that's marked up. So you'd switch this bone from one hand to the other, and then the opposing team would guess, like, which hand is it in? And it can become more and more complex. You can include the whole family. You can split into two teams, and then you pass that back and forth. You have all these hands going, and the bone being passed back and forth. And it really is it's a lot of fun, but it teaches you to be observant. It teaches that hand-eye coordination, because obviously you don't want to drop the bone as you're passing it back and forth between hands. So it's just really refining and really working on those fine motor skills for young kids.
Yeah, those motor skills they underlie so many other things that kids do, right? So like we think of literacy as something that you do with your eyes and with the written word, but so much of it has to do with your hands, right? And all making the connection between what you see, what you hear, what gets processed in your brain, and then what comes out through your fingers. But it doesn't make sense to rush the handwriting. What it does make sense is to do things like the hand game, where kids are using their hands and they don't even feel like they're doing work, they're playing, right? And they're so excited about guessing and the back and forth, the interaction, but you're laying that foundation for things like writing that's like so important.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And you think back to when we were younger and as kids, you'd have those little wooden boards where you'd have to weave the shoelace back and forth. It's teaching those same kind of skills. But the fun too, especially for the kids, when they think that they're able to fool their parents for anything in a game like that, or trick them to win, they're going to just be delighted by it. It's just so much fun.
Yeah, and I know one thing that's been popular on our site has been any activity that does not involve screens. Now we do have some things that do involve screens. They're like difficult skills. But like if kids are doing things like distance learning, they're doing a lot of Zoom calls, or they're interacting with their friends online, then getting them off the screen for a little bit, and that's beneficial.
Yeah,
That's balance.
exactly. And that's been a big thing. And my daughter too. I mean, she can learn well with the screens, but after a while, it just I've found that with her, it tends to affect her mood. And so finding these interactive face-to-face activities really was helpful to her.
Yeah, break the Zoom fatigue.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. No, and I love the resources you found, right? Like the historical photo from the reservation, right? And it's adults playing it, but and then you found like a set of instructions from an old book, and you know, and it has that eyewitness feeling to it.
It does, absolutely. And so this one actually came from a book. It was published by University of Nebraska Press. Great book, honestly. And there are 2 volumes of it. They're Native American games, and they have games of skill and games of chance. And they're designed, and you have these anthropologists who went out years ago and went and learned the games, learned the rules, grabbed every detail and recorded every detail they could, in order to preserve these for future generations. And you just see over and over these games of chance and skill that are designed to teach those fine motor skills, to teach coordination, to teach skills that they'll need when they're older and living their lives. And for Native kids, 19th century or the 20th century, this was vital to survival. And later on, this became and continued to be a part of their culture, a part of who they were. And interestingly enough, you see a lot of this like pan culturally throughout the world. These same kinds of games, we play them ourselves, but it's just a different way of playing, showing some similarities between culture, between ourselves and between Native people. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. No, I like by playing that game, like you're tapping into a really old tradition, and it's it's authentic, right? It's like how song collectors will collect folk songs, right? These are game collectors, right? And so this is not just made up stuff about what happened in the 17th century. This is like real stuff that Native cultures have been doing and continue to do, and we can use it to help our own kids. Yeah. Yeah, that's why I really appreciate the research you do. It's so fascinating.
Thank you.
So, okay, well, let's talk about the sort of for a little bit bigger kids, maybe like middle grade kids, the shadow puppet activity. And so I want to mention to anybody who's watching this video, there's a link to all these activities in the description of the video, and be sure and click through, and then there's a set of printable instructions that Ryan put together. And so that like helps you, it shows like how to build the puppet theater and things like that. So I just want to like tell people, like, you don't have to guess based on what Ryan's saying in the video. Like you can click through in the video and and then the blog post and it explains it all.
Yeah, and so this puppet theater actually is one I'm going to give credit my colleague Anna with this one. She and I had talked about this activity for a while. We were thinking about, okay, what can we do that incorporates a different Native American nation? And this is something that some people don't realize. When you think about Native people, it's not just Indians. We're talking about 500 nations, different languages, different traditions, different cultures, different variations of these stories that make up who these people are. And so for this activity, we actually worked off of a story that I used to use quite a bit. So when I was living in Utah, going to graduate school, I worked during the summers at this place called the American West Heritage Center. And I used storytelling as part of the activities that I would do. And one that I used was a Northwestern Shoshone story. Now, the Northwestern Shoshone, the Limhi Shoshone, this groups of people, I should say, came from northern Utah up into northern Idaho. Sacagawea or Sacagawea actually is Limhi Shoshone as well. And so would have heard stories like this growing up. This one is called How Coyote Stole Fire. And this story I would use as I was talking to people and sharing the culture tradition of Cache Valley in northern Utah. And it's a really interesting story. It's a really fun way of an explanation by the Northwestern Shoshone people how they acquired fire. And as part of that, I was talking with them, like, well, it'd be cool to find a way to allow kids to do some sort of puppetry using these animal figures, right? and showed her the book, which is, if you look at the link, that actually is a link to this published version of the story. It was published by Utah State University Press. And she was reading through there. She's like, these illustrations are really interesting. It would be fun to make our own versions of them that are inspired by the publication. And then kids could do a puppet show and a shadow puppet show. And so she put that together, and it's just incredible. So she created the PDF for the figures that you can use.
Yeah, I'll show you. Yeah,
full instructions right there.
Mm-hmm. Here's the, yep.
Exactly. And if you've got like a little pen light too to make the little fireball as well, because the story's all about how Coyote went down from where they lived, where it was all dark and cold, headed south to the desert people, and managed to steal fire and bring it back to his people up north. And so, get a little extra light there you can use as the fire. But kids enjoy the story. My children enjoyed the story. And anytime, and again, a lot of this programming is coming off of years of experience and experimentations. I've worked with other kids, and it's just a really fun way to teach, because kids feel such a kinship and such a joy. Learning about animals is a fun way to have these animal characters come to life for them. And again, learn a little bit more about native traditions as well, and that storytelling tradition particularly. Interestingly enough, there actually are, within this story, you'll be able to read this as parents. They can learn a little more about the Northwestern Shoshone, as well as some of their linguistic preservations, some words from that nation, part of their languages.
Yeah, that's amazing. You made a really good point about that. Right, there are like hundreds of native cultures, and that you've just sampled from a few of them for the activities in this post. And also the fact that you mentioned this with respect to the game, that sometimes variations of games will show up in different cultures, and this like for so like my kids have studied about Greek mythology, right, and so they might think about the Prometheus story, and and how like there are themes that occur in different cultures, but they could especially treasure the Shoshone version because it's got animals, and I can just imagine kids getting a hold of these puppets and just running with it. It's like they could do the Shoshone story, and then they can kind of start creating their own stories with these characters and really using their imagination.
Exactly. And the kids, kids have such great imaginations anyway. It would be a great way for them to just go on and continue building, flexing those creative muscles as they learn more about other stories. And it's a great contrast. It really is, to look at storytelling traditions throughout different cultures, like the Greek culture, Roman culture, all these native cultures as well, because even within the same kind of story, you can find different variations of it, and you find it that different characters are involved, different hero figures are involved, but there's a common thread that runs through a lot of these stories.
Right, like animals that are widespread across the West, like coyotes. They'll show up in myths and folklore in different cultures, but there might be different stories associated with them, right? So you can learn about animals through the folklore. Yeah. Well, is there anything else about I want to ask you a little bit about the Three Sisters activity, but was there anything else about the shadow puppets that you wanted to highlight? Oops, so we have lost Ryan for just a minute. Hopefully he can get reconnected. So I'm just going to fill in a little bit, and then he can catch us up. So the post has 3 different activities. So there's the one for preschoolers, which was the hand game. There's the shadow puppet activity, and that's kind of targeted for middle grades, but really big kids could enjoy it too. Oh, hey Ryan, it froze up for just a minute. Are you there?
Are you still there?
Yes. Yeah, the signal froze up. I was just filling in. I was talking about how the different activities were for different ages, and then I was going to ask you about the activity for like big kids, which is the gardening and the cooking, right? And it has to do with the Three Sisters. Right, you still there?
There you are.
Okay, good.
I'm still here. Yes. Can you see me?
Okay, good. Yes,
Yeah.
I can see you. Yeah.
Just had a little technical hiccup there. My apologies.
No problem. I'm thankful you could join us even from the road. So I was wondering if you could talk more about the Three Sisters activity.
There we are. Hello.
Hello.
A little technical hiccup there. But
Okay.
what was I saying? Oh, as far as those shadow puppets go, it's a great activity too, especially as you have kids or they're getting up a little older, and then not only flexing their creative muscles. I mean, being able to use those scissors, those fine motor skills in order to cut those puppets out. Also, too, building sets and having them again flex those creative muscles to help construct the scenery is another great way to really encourage kids not only to use those comparative analysis to create various types of stories, but then also their creative abilities in building their own sets, making the story their own. Because when kids look at a story, they learn it, they make it their own. Man, they will remember it forever.
Yeah. It becomes part of their mental furniture, so they can keep sharing.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's a great way to express it.
and it's part of being American to learn about native cultures in the United States, not just the immigrant cultures. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, I want to ask you more about the Three Sisters activity, because there's a gardening aspect to it, and there's a cooking aspect, and you've got kind of videos embedded in the post that represent both sides.
Exactly. And so when I was in Washington, D.C., we learned quite a bit about this, and we talked a lot about an Incan exhibition that came up that was really wonderful. But part of this activity originated from working with the botanical gardens a few years back. We had a children's garden program that I went and did with my kids. And so we would grow tomatoes and squash and broccoli and all these other things. It was loads of fun. It was surprising to me though, because like you mentioned at the beginning, I'm not originally from Texas. And so for me, having a growing season, that's a spring and summer thing. Not here though. And that's November, December that we have our growing season. So I thought, hey, how much fun would it be, especially for these older kids who are, I'm sure, looking for things to do when they're at home, have them plant their own style of garden. This Three Sisters garden is one of those things that I've tried myself. I have so much fun with it. I read about it, I think in college, and it was just super interesting to me. So what you do is you create this mound of earth, okay? And you can try this in like a big, Tupperware tub, like a storage tub or something like that. You can plant them in the ground, whatever you have space for, you can adapt it to make it work for you and your family. Then what you do is you take this mound, you plant the corn in the middle, and then you allow it to grow up a little bit, okay? And once those stalks are well out of the ground, at that point, you then plant the beans. Now you need to make sure that they're pole beans, that they're going to grow up and they're going to wrap around some sort of central column, which in this case is the corn stalk. Now it won't choke out the corn, it will just use it for support. And then you finally plant the squash out around it, okay? And what that does is it creates kind of a ground cover, so you have less to worry about in terms of weeds. The leaves of the squash kind of spread out and stretch out, and they keep those weeds, those foreign plants, from choking out or taking nutrients from the beans and the corn. Interesting fact, the nitrogen that's sucked up or absorbed from the soil by the corn is actually replenished by planting the beans. And so these three vegetables that are known as the Three Sisters, corn, beans, and squash, by many native nations. You see it in the Southwest, you see it in the Northeast. The Chickasaw in particular, one of the videos we included is from the Chickasaw Education Center. And they talk about that and the legend behind the Three Sisters. And so with those things together, they actually constitute a really wonderful combination of foods that is good for the earth. It's also nourishing for the body. Corn, beans, and squash used together create a complete protein. And so one of the things that we wanted to include was a recipe that we found that is the Three Sisters stew. And it's a vegetarian stew, but it's made using these three elements. So as kids, these older kids, as they grow their garden, as they take care of it, as they attend to it, and they actually see the fruits of their labors, then they can actually harvest those items, and from there I use them in something like making food for themselves, and seeing that complete life cycle is not only very satisfying on a very personal level, knowing that you've grown something that you now can eat that has served you in that way, but also it really satisfies a lot of those a lot of that STEM curriculum. Talk about the life cycle of plants with kids as they get older, as they're junior in high school, right? They get to see that firsthand. They get to learn about the process of putting nutrients back in the soil. It can be used on so many different levels. In addition to learning about the native people that discovered this agricultural tradition, that refined it, and some of the recipes that they easily could have used as part of their everyday life.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful activity because it combines, like you said, so many things, right? There's the science aspect of learning how plants grow and about nutrition. There's the history aspect that, right, this is how native cultures would use these crops together, right? And like why they work so well and how widespread it is. And then there's the practical aspect of, like, if you want kids to try vegetables, if you can convince them to grow it, they might be more willing to try it, because it's like, well, if I put this much work into it, watering it, weeding it, watching it grow,
exactly.
I gotta give it a try. Yeah.
Yeah, what a great way to, like, no better way to have your kids make sure to eat their vegetables than if you make them grow it themselves. So I think it's, yeah, absolutely. yeah.
No, and like the videos in the post are great.
I think
Let's see if we can get Ryan reconnected.
Can you see me?
Are you still there? Okay. Oh, well, we lost the audio for just a little bit. It froze up.
I'm here. Oh, okay.
I can hear you now. Okay.
All right. Can you see me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. So, what was it you said?
Oh, let's see. We were kind of wrapping up, talking about the Three Sisters, and, like, how kids it encourages them to grow the vegetables and try the vegetables, and try cooking with a new recipe. Oh, we lost the connection with Ryan. Let's see. Let's hope. Oh, he's back.
Where they, even if kids are in a situation where they can't grow their own West, that the kid could try, they could learn about, that they could work on themselves with parental supervision, of course. And again, you have these life skills that they're learning as well. And so with that, even if you can't immediately do the growing, do the cultivation of those vegetables, that recipe is there. The lessons with the Three Sisters are also there as a way to teach about native food culture in particular.
Yeah, you can still learn the folklore, the origin story, and you can still make the recipe and taste it, and it's nutritious.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, plus too, so much of what we eat nowadays, so many of the foods that we are accustomed to actually have native origins. They come from this country, but were cultivated by Native American people, and so we owe so much of our culture, our heritage, that the world that we know came from the lessons that they learned thousands of years before.
Yeah. No, it's a living tradition. It's an ongoing tradition. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, wonderful. Well, okay. That covers the three kind of at-home learning activities. But one of my goals in including this post on our site is to encourage people to visit the Briscoe. And there are some great, reasons why they can. And I'm pretty cautious, but I've been there myself. I've, masked up. They have good procedures. So,
Yes.
so I encourage people to go, but there's some special reasons. So there's the Visual Voices exhibit, there's the book club, and then there's also the Yanaguana Indian Arts Celebration, right? So I was wondering if you could talk about those.
Absolutely. And so, yes, so we have our, so the exhibition we have right now, our fall exhibition, Visual Voices, that runs through January, and it is Chickasaw contemporary artwork. And so you have these artists from all across America. There's even some Chickasaw artists living in our community. Brenda Kingery, work by so many of these other very talented artists that have taken their cultural traditions and integrated it into their contemporary artwork. And it's amazing to see. It's one of those things you have to come down and see. You have to see that tie-in between culture. There's all native made, whether it's weaving, whether it's shell carving or painting or ceramic work. It's amazing to see. So I highly encourage people to come down because you also get a lot of insight from the artists themselves. We have a lot of the labels on there are the artists talking about their work, why it's meaningful, why it touches their cultural traditions. We plan to, on the 10th of this next week, we're having our Briscoe Book Club. The book is called The Nampolichi, The Word Master. And it's a really fun tale. It's a story of a 13 winds up being washed ashore in the Americas and taken under his wing by a Chickasaw word master. And so there's a lot of Chickasaw words in there that people can learn and use. So we'll be talking on the 10th all about that book, discussing its contents, discussing the story and some of the meanings behind it. Don't spoil it, but I highly recommend it. I've really enjoyed it. And then also the Yanaguana Indian Arts Celebration. That's really interesting. We normally use our that time, the November 21st and 22nd, those weeks in that weekend in November, for our Yanaguana Indian Arts Market and Community Day. However, given the current circumstance in the world, we're not able to do that. And so what we've decided to do instead is to take it virtual. And so we're going to have some of our traditional favorites, some of the artists who have been presenters, performers during the Yanaguana Indian Arts Market. Ty Defoe is a wonderful dancer and storyteller. Tim Louflin-Randall plays native flute. Amy Blumel's storyteller. Presenters like George Curtis Levi, who we talking about ledger art, and Shane Hendren, who's doing a presentation on silversmithing. In addition to a tour that we did with the AIT, American Indians in Texas, the Tapilquitecan Nation, and them talking about the missions and what that means to them culturally. And again, with that tour, I was very interested to learn some brand new things about Native food culture. We'll also be presenting a panel with the Chickasaw Art Board, who really planned and prepared and developed our show, Visual Voices. And so it's going to be available online. It's going to be open to the public. There are going to be some great activities involved there. And hopefully everyone will come on. I was talking to Molly the other day, and she was mentioning friends that she had. They're like, man, I really wish we had ways to instill and talk about Native culture during Native American Heritage Month. And what can I do? I'm like, well, let me tell you. So this Yanaguana Indian Arts Celebration, or Indian Culture Celebration, highly recommend it. Please check that out. Come and check out Visual Voices. We do have COVID measures in place to protect our visitors, to give them the safest experience possible. We'll still be able to come out of the house. For the adults that you're wanting a little bit of a change from your routine, read a Nampolichi. We have it available in our museum store, and we would love to have you participate in our book club with us. And for anyone that wants to learn more, anyone who wants to go even deeper into these lessons of Native history, art, and culture, we actually have a box series that we only release these usually during our community days, during those months. And it's called Bring Home the Briscoe. And this month we have some of the seeds available to grow a Three Sisters garden. We have different stories available, pottery activities. We actually have a Salish version of Coyote Steals Fire, but in this case, it's Beaver Steals Fire. And I highly recommend them. Those are available, again, on our museum store as well. So there is just a multitude of options available to parents and families who want to ensure that their children learn not only about, of course, about Thanksgiving and the traditions behind that, but also about the variety and the diversity of Native people that inhabit and still continue to inhabit this country today, and add to the cultural richness of the country.
Yeah, that's why the Briscoe is such a great ally for, us as parents. We're busy parents, but we want to move beyond just having, good intentions or just the awareness that it's Native American Heritage Month, but actually like to engage with it and do something with it, right? That's why, the Yanaguana Indian Arts Celebration, right? There's so much you can learn from it, right? And these activities, that you all and your team have created, and then, families can do it from home. And I definitely encourage the museum store. I'm going to bust out that's where I got my bandana, of course, right?
Yes.
There's lots of great stuff at the museum store, and that's actually one of my favorite places to get gifts for the holidays is museum stores, because the stuff they have is unique, and there's some very fancy stuff there too. There's I bought some postcards, but there's some fancy stuff there too, and you're supporting the museum while giving your friends and family gifts that are unique that they'll really treasure. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm popping up the URL again so that folks can, go to the Briscoe Museum website. That's where you can find more information about things like, Visual Voices, right, which is at the museum through January, about the Yanaguana Indian Arts Celebration, about the book club that you mentioned, right, where you can learn about, the storytelling, and. Yeah, and and just want to mention there's, again, the link to the blog post is in the description of the video. So I encourage everybody to bust that out and spend some time with your kids, trying out, maybe, build the shadow puppet theater with them, play the hand game, either set up a garden or just go to the grocery store and get the ingredients.
Even spend some time cooking, right?
Right, exactly. Right. Learn some cooking skills. Yeah.
Maybe your kids make you a dinner for the change, right?
Ooh, yeah. I love that. Yeah, my daughter made me a smoothie for lunch. That was exactly what I needed.
Oh, nice. Perfect.
Yeah.
Got him on a good path then.
That's right. Okay. Well, Ryan, is there any kind of closing thoughts about what's going on at the Briscoe or about Native American Heritage Month before we kind of wrap up the chat?
No, honestly, please come and visit. This is a rare opportunity, especially where we have such a wonderful collision and coming together, I guess you could say, of opportunities to learn about Native culture, Native heritage, not only in the past but in the present. I mean, Native people exist today. They live with their culture and heritage today. They still exist, and we still have so much to learn from that heritage. I mean, it is foundational to our country, our way of life. Everything that we know has been touched in some way by Native people, and what they've done and what they've added to this world. And so any opportunity you have where you can learn more about them, I highly recommend it. We have wonderful resources even here in our own city, and not just for shameless self-promotion, but go check out the Briscoe. It's a good place to start.
Yeah. Okay, well that's a beautiful message. We can all learn more about Native cultures, appreciate the wisdom, right? Things like the cooking, the gardening, the storytelling, and and appreciate how it is a part of our lives, and we can just learn to be more aware of it, and we can learn to appreciate working, living contemporary artists, who are bringing their heritage into their work every day.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. All right, everybody, visit the Briscoe.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Inga. This has been so much fun to visit with you again.
It's been great. I look forward to seeing you soon. Take care, Ryan.
Absolutely. Thank you.